Welcome everyone to Sharing Soulful Stories. Today I am here with Shivani Hawkins. Welcome, Shivani.
Thank you. So excited. So exciting to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. I'm just going to let everyone know a little bit more about you and what you do. So Shivani is a meditation teacher and a multi-disciplinary artist, and the founder of two schools, Living Sanskrit, a global school for indigenous wisdom and sacred practices from the tradition of yoga and Hindu dharma, and the Center for Natural Mind, which is a secular humanist meditation school that connects us with our natural state of being. Whoa, you are a lady of some serious wisdom. I'm feeling it already.
Oh, goodness. I always get scared when people say that. I'm like, no.
No. Well, let's see. What I am curious about, though, is the question I've asked everybody to get us going in this interview is, what does spirituality mean to you?
So what spirituality means to me, and it's funny, this is what it means to me in my personal life, but it's also what it is in my tradition. And it starts with what we would call the great questions. Who am I? What is this world? Why am I here? What is my purpose? What happens when I'm no longer alive? What is real? How do I know what is real? These questions about our world, about the nature of being, about what it all means. And the search for those answers is what I would call spirituality.
I love that. What's really interesting is that my daughter, who is 9, is asking me all those questions.
Yep.
And I'm here having all of those questions and playing with that in these conversations. Yeah. It's so wonderful. And I wonder now, can you share whether spirituality has always been part of your life? Or was there any sort of triggering event that kicked it off for you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I am one of those sort of freak children, you could say. My dad said the first time I asked him about God, I was 18 months, which freaked him out. And both my parents are very committed to their spiritual lives, and my grandparents, and it's, but it still freaked him out. I remember again, I'm thinking of those questions. So I grew up in a spiritual tradition with a spiritual teacher who I have a close relationship to. But I remember being like 5 and having a crazy story, actually, crying on the playground, lying on the grass, sobbing, staring at the sky, trying to figure out if God or some sort of presence was real. And it was like I knew that my entire life depended on the answer to that question. And I also knew that I couldn't know. So for me, it did start very young. I did not realize how weird that was until much later in my life. And I also grew up with a lot of what we would call spiritual practices like meditation and chanting and prayer and, different rituals and rites of passage and things like that. But again, I think all of those things, without that inner yearning to know the truth of those questions, is where it goes into the realm of religion. Mm-hmm. And spirituality is really about your personal search to answer those questions. And that I've always been obsessed with those questions. I think I'm definitely still asking those questions. I don't think that it's over. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And how fascinating that for you there was this deep curiosity from such a young age. That's really amazing. And now could you share with us a little bit more about your spirituality story, any sort of highs and lows that stand out between then and now?
So coming into the world completely obsessed with needing to know the truth and not knowing what was real and what wasn't, and just having, I remember like 6, 7, 8, 9 asking myself questions even before I knew about like Descartes and stuff of like, how do I know what I think? Like, are my thoughts even real? These sorts of really bizarre questions, which, a lot of children have different sort of gifts. I'm not musically talented. I can't draw. But I think for me, that sort of philosophical inquiry came very naturally to me. And it was the thing that I just did without being taught how to do it, and then I was lucky. So in terms of spiritual highs for me, I think the single biggest blessing that I've had is being born into a community and having a relationship with the master teacher who could answer those questions and not answer them for me, like, here is the answer, but give me the tools to find those answers for myself. And that I come from a tradition that has a lot of, I think what people don't realize about the yogic tradition and about, Hinduism in general is we don't have doctrine. We have what I call lab notes, thousands and thousands of people who have written down their discoveries of spiritual practice. Most of our scriptures are actually dialogues. They're questions and answers. Someone is expressing doubt or confusion and someone else is answering. And none of that is stuff that you're supposed to believe. It's stuff that you can take as inspiration for your own practice. And I was incredibly fortunate. Like I said, I realized a lot of people in my own community even asked those questions and didn't have people that could give them answers. My grandmother is incredibly knowledgeable about our spiritual tradition and told me stories and wisdom tales. And, so it was like, it was like I was a very rebellious child spiritually, and I didn't believe anything. It was funny because I had all this structure. And, I've pushed back against my spiritual teacher constantly, like to this day. It's not like that relationship is, it's not just like, oh, I have a guru and I'm completely obedient. It's like, it's a dialogue, and it's me bringing my questions to her with the full weight of like, I need to know what the truth is, and then having support for answering that. So that's the high is the many, many instances of asking and actually having those answers given. Many instances of deep and profound longing and needing protection in times of profound suffering from, I was bullied systemically for many, many years, in part because of my spiritual life as a child. In school, I was the only non-Christian, so I got asked, kids wouldn't talk to me because they were told, they would ask me, what type of Indian are you? And I grew up in Southern California, and I was like, oh, I'm, they're like, what are you? And I said, I'm Indian, and I was born here, and they would say, well, what tribe? And I didn't know how to answer that because I was like, I don't have a tribe. And they're like, well, you're not a real Indian. How are you Indian? I was like, well, we meditate. We're like 5 years old, right? So I do not know how to answer this. And I said, I meditate. And then they came back the next day and said, our mom says we can't talk to you because only people who worship the devil meditate.
I feel like we've come a long way since then, but I hope we've come a long way since then. But I can only imagine.
This was the 80s, and it was painful. And I was, I had skipped 2 grades, and I didn't look like anyone and sound like anyone, and I ate different food, and because of that isolation, 2 things happened. One is that I read tons and tons of books. The other was I spent a ton of time in my head asking these questions. The third was that I was desperate to find purpose and meaning in the midst of that kind of isolation. And the fourth blessing was actually that people ask me, like, who are your friends then? I'm like, I literally played with like butterflies and flowers and trees and bugs because like no one else would play with me. And I had this, to this day, I see trees. My husband teases me all the time, but like they are my friends, like I didn't have that broken connection to the natural world because they were my companions for until I was about 15, I think, before I actually made sort of close human friends my age. And I was very shy, and I still am, which people don't believe. But it was like the perfect training ground for spiritual life. And I feel like everything I do now came out of that, and that longing for grace. Like I really needed to know, is there something holding this whole mess and chaos of existence together? And is that thing arbitrary, or like, is it a benevolent force? And over and over and over again, I would have this experience that grace is real, there is love in our universe. There is presence. We are never alone. And not only are we never alone, we live in an interwoven fabric of grace, of connection. And that's what spirituality, I think, is actually inviting us to. And then in my 20s, like I had some health issues, and, you know, everyone has relationship drama in their 20s, or you're not in your 20s, or, you know, and you're trying to figure out your path and your life. And I don't think that I have things figured out any more than anyone else. But I think I've had enough instances of those like tangible moments of grace. And it's not really about blind faith. It's not believing that there's some outside entity that is protecting me, and that's fine if people do. It's more an experience that the waters in which we swim are themselves full of grace. That existence itself has a kind of grace to it, and there is beauty and preciousness and wonderment woven into the inherent experience of being alive. And everything is an opportunity to touch that. And so whether or not you find a community or a teacher or a lineage or a church or a temple, you know, like that's dependent on you and your path and what helps you connect. But the moment of connection, I mean, I think a lot of people don't realize that you can be atheist and still have a really profound spiritual life. It's really not about your theology. I believe in God because I've had experiences of some sort of sacred presence that I consider to be my source, who I feel love and devotion for. But that doesn't mean you can't feel that network of grace, even if you don't have that experience, you know? But it keeps coming down to that. I'm like, what is my spiritual life? I thought about this when you first invited me to this. I was like, it's that experience of grace. And grace is a word, you know, obviously in English that has a lot of different meanings, and in many different languages translates very differently. But I think whatever it is that turns you back to your, that field of purpose, of truth, of love, of kindness, of unity, you know, that's what spiritual life is about. And frankly, if it's not bringing you back to that place, it's like, why are you doing it? You know, is it really working for you? So, yeah.
Oh, I love everything you said so much. I don't even know what to pull out of that, because I feel what a blessing having someone that could help you answer those questions without feeding you the answers they feel that you should have. It would have shifted my upbringing in a big way. I personally feel I was seeking this connection for such a long time, and it's definitely one reason why Christianity, you know, the way it was presented to me, I get there's some beautiful things within it, felt too restrictive. I was like, this isn't really what I'm seeking here. And it's those questions and the answers, and that's kind of what I'm hoping to share with these videos. As you said, I can't remember the exact phrase. I'm even going to quote you at the end. I'm going to have to go back and pull it out. But what that the description of grace is so perfect, that is all around and is available, and we can all touch it. It is so good.
And,
so
you
good.
know, the English concept of grace does come from the Christian tradition. It's funny because my husband grew up in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which a lot of people think of as the Mormon church. And even though members of our family still practice, he does not. He doesn't consider himself part of that church, I think for similar reasons. But actually just this morning we were talking about kindness and the importance of kindness, how I firmly believe that when you look out at like the chaos of existence and the fact that you never really know what's true, you don't often know what to hold on to. You know, and the more you sit with the truth of what is actually true, you realize that so much of what we think is true is actually just our structures to give sense and meaning to our world. You know, it's our labels, it's our, this is how it should be, you know, our concepts and so on. And as you start to dismantle a lot of that, which we do obviously in meditation practice, it can feel very disorienting. And I was telling him this morning, I was like, you know, the single fastest way to find meaning and purpose and to organize the chaos is through kindness. Because the moment that you're kind, you don't have to, it just, things make sense. You know, they just make sense. And I was teasing him because I was like, you know, the tradition that I feel like really taught that is Christianity in a lot of ways. You know, like what Christ was about was that total and complete kindness, you know, which I realize isn't always how it was exercised and practiced in the world. But I was like, even if, you know, I tease him that I'm like, he's a enthusiastic agnostic at this point. And he's very passionate about his I don't know-ness, you know, and very wary of any kind of doctrine or organization, but he's still deeply spiritual. And we were laughing, and I said, you know, I said, you were initiated into a path of kindness. Like you always have that. You always have that. You know, no matter what your spiritual life looks like that was your early practice as a child. And I think that's true across traditions. If you look at it, you know, so many traditions teach compassion, or we practice, you know, all of our practices are offered for the upliftment of all beings.
Yes.
You know, not just obviously human, but animal and plant and mineral. Like there's nothing that doesn't have, we say consciousness, but we mean there's nothing that doesn't have the light of grace, of God, of divinity, of sanctity, of whatever presence within it. Yeah. So it, and I think that that's a teaching that as you ask those questions of yourself of like, why am I here? What's the purpose of my life? What am I here to do? I can't guarantee it, but there's a very high probability you will come back to this place of be kind. You know, I think it's just human nature that it brings us through our own journey. We keep coming back to this place of like the most important thing is love.
Yeah. Oh, I love that you added that so much, because if people get nothing more out of these interviews other than how can I be more kind every day, then that would just, you know, that would be such a blessing for everybody around them and the whole planet, to be honest. Oh, so I'm really interested though to ask you my next question, which is, how do you weave spirituality into your life and your work?
Ooh. Like I said, because these questions have been part of my life from the beginning, I don't really, like my life is my spiritual life. I don't have a separate life outside of my spiritual life. I mean, on a very practical level, I have a daily meditation and chanting and ritual practice. And, you know, in the yoga and like the Hindu tradition, we have literally the whole vision is seeing divinity in everything. So before you eat, there's like a moment of recognition of sanctity while you're cooking, while you're working, while you go to the bathroom. Like there's literally all the rituals are they're not required, and people choose which ones they do, but they're opportunities to remember the truth in whatever sort of worldly task you're doing. So in that sense, it's like cultural, and also it's just part of my life. In terms of my work, both my art career and my meditation teaching started at the suggestion of my teacher, which is really funny. And I actually resisted both for a while and went to law school, and that was also funny. You know,
didn't we all do one of those?
I realized, you know, I was like, she wasn't telling me what to do. She was showing me what I am. And I couldn't really hear that at the time. So all throughout law school, I had a health crisis. That was quite bad. And it was my opportunity to really be like, who am I actually? And I realized I'm like, the thing I love most is creating. truth and beauty, which I feel like I try to do through my art. And like meditation practice is my life. Like it's given me everything, the opportunity to sit with myself and ask those questions. You know, it literally is the most valuable, precious, nourishing, sacred thing in my life. Like it saved my life countless times, you know, from anxiety, from depression, from grief, from anger, from, you know, whatever's going on. It's like that time with myself, and the ability to learn, to continue to develop my ability to see myself and my world clearly. I'm also like, for example, right now, a lot of my art takes the form of photography, and I joke around that I'm like, I specialize in the art of seeing, because even my photography, like I shoot, primarily I shoot portraits, and I feel like my job is to see people clearly and see their light. And in meditation practice, it's the same thing. I'm trying to see clearly.
Yes.
And, you know, so it's absolutely, it's part of everything, almost to the point of being annoying to people who are not like that in my life. They're like, really, does God have to come into everything? And I'm like, but God is already in everything. You know, but I mean, I think there's ways of it really is about everything being an opportunity for for recognizing the preciousness of each moment, of wonder, of magic, of insight, of mystery. There's no moment in time that is empty. You know, it's always full. And so that, in that sense, spirituality is really more about awareness of truth as you're living your life. And even when you're like grieving and angry and traumatized and triggered, and you can be like, I'm so mad, you know, and even in that, there's like, wow, there is so much life surging through my body right now, you know, and so much violence and so much like that can be something to relish, even as you're like, okay, maybe I shouldn't punch that person in the face right now. No, I want to. You know? Yeah. So.
Yeah. Oh, I love all of that. I love all of that. Yeah, I don't need to reflect again. I just feel like you've said it all so beautifully, so beautifully. The idea of just, connecting to the preciousness of every moment is just so, the potential there to get so much more joy out of life. As you say, even that acknowledgement of I'm furious and I'm angry, but wow, how does this feel in my body is so like, what a gift, what a gift. And yes, to then have the awareness to not punch the person in the face as well that you're really angry with.
Yeah, exactly. It's both, right? It's both.
Yeah.
I think, and yeah, if I can just add to that real fast, it's like, I think a lot of people think like, especially when they're first starting out, that spirituality, it's a very outer thing. You know, they're like, oh my God, my whole life will change. Oh my God, all my relationships and all my clothes and all my hairstyles. And like, it's a very outward performance when you're first starting out. And I feel like the more you practice, the more you realize like you actually look and act exactly the same. You know, the performance quality actually goes down, and then, but inside it's a completely different experience.
Oh,
you know, inside, like the same cup of tea or the same conversation or the same being stuck in traffic, like it's a completely different experience. And that to me is when you're really receiving the blessing of that spiritual work. And every now and then people will be like, there's something about you, and you're like, don't tell anyone, but I'm actually happy. That's what it is. It's like, don't tell anyone, but what is the blessing of the spiritual life? Like, I'm actually happy.
Oh,
most of the time, not all the time.
Yeah. I'm so glad you added that. That was funny. Another lady whose video was released already, she said that people started saying things to her on the street, like, you look different. What is it? Have you lost weight? She's like, no, I'm just happy for the first time in my life.
And you don't realize how weird that is until you look around. You're like, people aren't happy.
They're not happy. And I feel that, sorry, going back to something you touched on earlier about the structures that we've formed around ourselves. For me, what happened as I journeyed more into this who am I, why am I here spiritual inquiry, sorry, I've said that with some other accent that is not my own. And yeah, and it's like you're building new structures kind of within to support you, so that no matter what happens out there, you're still good. You're still able to hold that place where you feel that supported grace. Yeah. Anyway.
And that's actually a big thing in my tradition. I think a lot of people, you know, we sort of are the first place a lot of people come to hear, like, oh my gosh, everything is love, everything is one, you know, and things that, you know, my people have been saying for thousands of years. And I think the West really loved those teachings. But a lot of people didn't hear the other half of it, which is in order to safely hold the fact that everything is one, you need to have those loving structures, you know? I know people who have been assaulted by people who are like, everything is one, who cares? You know, or everything is one, and it becomes a use for spiritual bypass, or everything is love and light, so therefore we won't fight injustice, we won't eat the right food, we won't create a sustainable world. And it's both. You know, those loving structures are born out of, because everything is one, we will create systems that take care of everybody. And, you know, but you don't become so obsessed with the system that you forget that, like, the good, the bad, the light, the dark, like everything is one.
Yeah.
It's both, you know? So a lot of actually the work that we do now is helping put a lot of these teachings in context so that people can understand, like, and also proceed through them safely, you know, so that you don't want to injure yourself or others in your spiritual life.
Yes, I love that you added that. Thank you so much. And this next question is, I think you've given some beautiful advice already through this talk, but now I would love to know if you've got any advice for somebody that is probably having those exact same questions. Who am I? Why am I here? Is spirituality, does it hold some answers for me? Do you have any advice for them?
Oh boy. I don't have advice in the sense of do this or do that. I have suggestions for 2 skills I would learn that will support you on your journey. So the first skill is learning to really deeply listen to yourself, and really deeply listen in general. You know, however you learn to do that. I mean, I do it through meditation practice, but have some sort of system of profound and loving self-inquiry where you can sit with yourself, ask questions. What am I really needing and wanting? What is really happening right now? Because no matter where you go on your journey, you're going to need that ability to sit with yourself, even as you encounter different teachings and different teachers and paths and practices and life challenges. You know, the unifying factor in your life is you. You know, that's the thread. So you want to connect with that. And I think I'll add to that. The other part of learning to really deeply listen to yourself is learning to do so in a shame-free space. I think the single biggest obstacle for people is they only look at the parts of themselves that they're comfortable with because there's so much shame. And so we don't do the shadow work. We don't learn to set good boundaries. We don't learn to actually make changes, and spirituality becomes like another part of the lives we already had. And we want to transform, you know, we want to grow through this process. And we can't grow if we're feeling burdened by shame. And so learning how to sit with feelings of shame, feelings of unworthiness, feelings of loneliness and isolation, feelings of not being good enough, whatever, if we can hold ourselves with love through that, we can face everything. So I guess those are two skills already. It's going to be one, but, and then the other sort of thread that I would give is learn to identify and touch the experience of pure delight, of wonderment, of joy. Again, I think a lot of people think the spiritual life can be hard, and it's not that the spiritual life is hard, it's that life is hard, you know, and will test you and break you and push you. But if you can track and honor those moments of delight and curiosity and wonderment, it will give you the lift you need to get through the harder times. And it'll give you the momentum to keep going. Because there's no end. As long as we're here, we're going to be looking for answers. You know? And that would be my last piece of advice. Don't stop looking. Don't think like, I have found it. Because you have.
Yes, I'm here. I'm done. No.
You know, it's like
just show you something else.
Yeah, it's not that there's a place that's the end. It's the process is the end. The process of asking those questions, of listening, of surrendering, of finding wonder and joy and delight. Like, and I mean, real delight, not just like, oh my God, I had chocolate cake, it was so good. That's what my tradition would call pleasure.
Yeah.
That's not going to fill you up, you know, buying more things, for example, but moments of connection, of insight, of, just, you know, like inner delight, you know? Yeah. To track them and to be like, find out what that feels in your body. Find which practices and experiences and life habits consistently allow for those moments of delight to come up a lot. I use Facebook a lot. You're all welcome to add me on there. I also hate Facebook. Yeah. It does not spark joy, as Marie Kondo would say, at all. Exactly. And I have days where I'm just like, I'm done. You know, it does not bring delight. And so I know that like when I'm feeling a little disconnected, I'm like, this is not a place that I will get my spiritual needs met.
Exactly. I divorced Facebook last year, really. I was like, I can't do this anymore. I don't understand this interaction.
I quit for 4 years, and it was the most productive, creative time of my life. But unfortunately, right now I'm in a place where, you know, wanting to stay important as well. And it's, but I still periodically like, okay, bye guys, I'm gone for 2 weeks.
Time out. So happy. Yeah, that's it. Oh, I love all of that. I love everything you said then. I hope that reaches those people that for them, that is exactly the door creaking open, that they are like, oh yeah, okay. And delight. I mean, we can look at children, right? You know it when you see it in kids. And they're just, whatever they're doing, rolling around in the grass or, you know, leaping in the water or something. And they're in that sort of almost ecstatic place of joy and wonder and delight. I just love that. That's fantastic. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And I want to make sure there is some space here to allow you to share a bit more about what you do and how, if anyone is curious, they can reach out and connect with you.
Perfect. Thank you. And, thank you all for listening so far. So I actually have 2 schools. The one that, well, they're both close to my heart. The one that is sort of me honoring where I came from is we have a school called Living Sanskrit, which is a school for the traditional wisdom and practices of my tradition. We have a whole just amazing faculty who we teach everything from like Sanskrit language to mantra to chanting to ritual, connecting with nature, healing practices, mythology. Like if you've ever wondered, like, what are the deities? What do they represent? You know, how to make sacred art, sacred geometries. Like there's an ocean of wisdom. And each of these things is an opportunity to actually connect with self. So for people who are curious about what the indigenous tradition actually looks like, which is not what people think of as yoga, is we teach that at Living Sanskrit. And then the other school, which I was just telling you, I hope the new site will be up in time. It's not a new school. The Center for Natural Mind is for people who are like, I'm afraid of tradition, or I don't like tradition, or I don't want, I just want to have a way to sit with myself and learn how to meditate. The Center for Natural Mind is a secular humanist meditation school. So we're very trauma informed, and it's just that practice of what is the natural state of my mind? How do I sit with it? How do I connect with that experience of being in myself and around me with my world? So it's a place you can go to learn how to do all that. Outside of a lot of my work talks about respecting source cultures, and so this one is all lineage teachings, that are older than me, much older than me, which I feel like I'm really just a steward of. And then this is sort of a modern play for modern times.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Last thing is, if you want your portraits taken and you're in Northern California, come find me.
That's it. I'll seek you out.
Sacred Natural. Yep. That's
amazing. I will put all the links that you've shared with me with the video when we share this video. Thank you so much for that conversation. It was beautiful. I'm so happy I was able to connect with you and share your story today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for inviting me. I don't get to share it very often, so it feels very sacred and precious. And thank you to anyone who's listening. Thank you I hope you ask those questions and see where they take you. It's fun.
Perfect. What a perfect ending. All right. Bye now.
Bye.
Okay, we're back after saying bye, and Shivani's just going to share one more high point on her journey with everybody.
Well, so we just ended this call, and then I was telling Joe about wait, sorry, time out. Did you just say Joe? It's Joe, right?
We're going.
So I think we just ended this conversation, and then I had this other thing, and I was like, I didn't have time for this on the call. And then Joe just suggested that I share it. So I'll share this with you. One of the biggest turning points on my journey, in my tradition, we talk a lot about we use the language of enlightenment and liberation and awakening. And, it's this big mystical process where you become one with the universe and so on and so forth. And I think, being a little too overactive in my brain, I had all these stories of what that meant and, how we would get there, and like in questions, and like, how do we become enlightened, and what does that even mean? And one of the turning points was in my early 20s. I was sitting at the dining table, and I heard this voice in my heart that was like, don't worry about enlightenment. It's not in your hands. Just try to be a good person. And I just felt this, like, I don't even know how to explain it. It was like this huge weight came off of my being, because it was like, it's true. It's not in my hands. It's in the hands of grace. And, in my tradition, if we keep doing the practices, like, we will become enlightened eventually, but it's really not something that we grasp after or control. And it was like, the only thing I have to do is just be a good person. And it was like so simple. And I was like, oh, well, I can do that.
Yes.
And it was like, that's
doable.
the only thing I need to do. So thank you for letting me have that on.
Yay. Okay.
Yay.
Bye again.